Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tale Tracks. Today's case comes from the documentary Evil Lives Here, and I know what you might be thinking. Is it going to be one of those dull, senseless cases, just another typical Sunday afternoon story? Well, let me stop you right there. This case will have you fuming within the first 5 seconds, because in this story, not a single person acts rationally. We have a mother who's overly permissive, a stepfather who's excessively strict, and a child who did quite literally whatever he wanted, zero boundaries. And naturally, all of this spiraled into a brutal crime. A warning, if you're sensitive, I don't recommend watching this video because the details are truly harrowing. If you subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below, well, even better. It's free and it helps me out more than you realize. Let's begin. It all starts with a woman named Derek Litz. Shelley was described by everyone who knew her as sweet, kind-hearted, approachable, and humble. No one ever characterized her as strong-willed or authoritative. Everything I've found online paints the picture of someone who, though it may sound harsh, simply wasn't built for confrontation. She disliked conflict and avoided it whenever possible. She often lived in someone else's shadow. In fact, she was always the friend of the girlfriend, or the sister of someone. Never just Shelley. This detail will become very important later. In high school, she earned good grades and went on to college, where she made a few poor decisions. Chief among them was neglecting to take proper care of herself. At 18, she discovered she was pregnant. At the time, she didn't have a stable partner. Some sources claim she did, but that he disappeared once she told him. Others say it was a one-time encounter that didn't mean much. Each version differs in the details. But they all agree on one thing: Shelley was not ready to be a mother. She didn't feel prepared. She felt immature, too young, yet despite everything, she decided to move forward with the pregnancy. On November 13, 1991, she gave birth to a baby boy named Derek Litz. From the moment he was born, Shelley knew he was going to be her whole world. She was ready to give him everything, anything he needed. But when Derek was just 7 weeks old, he nearly died. He became seriously ill, and doctors gave him no real chance of survival. He was too small, too fragile, and his condition was critical. Miraculously, he pulled through. From that moment on, Shelley vowed to give him everything she had. And when I say everything, I mean everything. If he cried, she would respond immediately. She never left him alone. He was always in her arms. Even as a baby, she never let him out of her sight. She took him absolutely everywhere. This obsession went far beyond maternal instinct. She showered him with affection and constant attention. And when he began to speak, it was more of the same. According to Shelley, Derek was an exceptionally well-behaved child. He never caused trouble. He never talked back. But that wasn't because he was naturally obedient. It was because he never had time to argue. As soon as he opened his mouth, he got exactly what he wanted. In the beginning, everything seemed ideal. At least until the tantrums began, and they were far from ordinary. A typical child might scream, wave their arms, cry, or throw a fit. But Derek was different. His meltdowns were unnervingly calm. He would stand still, stare directly at you, his fists trembling with rage. You could see the fury in his eyes, the sheer anger boiling beneath the surface, and when he finally exploded, it was with frightening violence. He would grab a glass and smash it to the ground, hurling objects across the room. But the moment that truly marked a turning point, the scene highlighted in Evil Lives Here, was an outburst in a supermarket. Shelley and Derek had gone out to do a quick shop, just a few things before heading home. They walked through the toy aisle and Derek grabbed a toy truck. He told his mother he wanted it, but she said no, it wasn't in the budget, nor part of the plan. That's when Derek threw a tantrum. But it was a tantrum in his own unique style. He gripped the truck tightly and began slamming it, breaking it apart. And once he finished, he calmly threatened her. If she didn't buy him a truck, he would destroy everything in the store. Shelley's response? She bought him the truck. No questions, no arguments, no boundaries. The child destroyed things without remorse. And the only way to stop him was to give in. This pattern repeated itself over and over again. From a very young age, Derek behaved in an unusually rigid way. He was extremely structured and methodical, and whenever something disrupted his routine, he would lose control. According to his mother, he had a very specific way of doing things. He imposed strict routines on himself, even as a toddler. The way he woke up, how he ate breakfast, everything followed a very fixed structure. Any deviation would send him into a spiral of frustration. Socially, he struggled as well. He didn't interact normally with other children. He was introverted, withdrawn, and disliked physical contact. He avoided social play altogether and seemed to live in his own world. He was also extremely sensitive to certain things. foods, textures, gestures. One particularly notable trait was his aversion to getting his hands dirty. He couldn't stand eating with his hands. Whether it was an apple, a banana, or a sandwich, he insisted on using a knife and fork for everything. And when it came to play, he didn't behave like a typical child. He didn't pick up toys, move them around, or give them voices. Instead, he would take them out of the toy chest, line them up in a perfectly straight row, and simply stare at them for hours. Then, when he was done, he would put everything back as if nothing had happened. That was his idea of play. He didn't understand any other way. Shelley never questioned it. According to her, he was simply special, peculiar, but nothing more. She didn't think he had a problem. She just believed he was unique. But the real issue was that his patterns couldn't be disrupted. Any change would send Derek into an uncontrollable rage. On one occasion, a neighborhood boy came over to play. They went into Derek's room and started chatting a bit. As always, Derek took out his toys and arranged them in a straight line. The visiting boy, acting innocently, picked up one of the toys and began to play with it. In response, Derek lashed out violently. He threw himself on the other child, screaming and hitting him. Shelley quickly intervened and separated them. But what happened next is telling. Shelley never spoke about the incident. She always defended Derek, no matter what he did. If he hit another child, it was because the child had provoked him, not because Derek had a behavioral issue. If he responded aggressively, the blame fell on her, for not paying enough attention, for not buying him what he wanted, for not giving him chocolate. It was never Derek's fault. In her mind, he was perfect. She didn't believe he needed a psychologist. She didn't think she needed to ask for help of any kind. As far as she was concerned, she and Derek were happy just the way they were. At least, that's how it was. Until Derek turned 10. That's when Shelley began dating a man named Robert. At first, she kept the relationship private. She didn't tell Derek about Robert. She kept it a secret. But eventually, Robert proposed to her, and Shelley had no choice but to introduce him to her son. She warned Robert in advance. She explained Derek's temperament, how difficult he was to control. Robert listened carefully and took note. He then arranged a meeting between the three of them. But Robert's introduction was bizarre. He approached Derek, touched his head, and began rifling through his hair. When Derek asked what he was doing, Robert replied that he was looking for 666, the number of the devil. Some sources describe the moment as an awkward joke, others criticize it harshly, saying it was completely inappropriate and disrespectful. It's worth noting that Robert was also a very particular man. He had a strong personality, strict, controlling, and highly methodical. When he and Shelley got married and he moved into the home, he decided to become the father figure Derek had never had. Almost immediately, he laid down a series of rigid rules. He enforced new routines, schedules, and house rules. Derek clashed with him hard. He refused to accept Robert's authority. Up until that point, he had been the one in charge at home. So the arrival of Robert and his attempts to take control were infuriating to him. Fights broke out constantly. Shouting matches, confrontations, neither of them would back down. Robert stood his ground. And Derek, even more so. What was most disturbing, however, was Shelley's behavior throughout all of this. She oscillated from one side to the other. When Robert yelled at Derek, she said nothing. She hid, then behind her husband's back. She would go to her son and apologize for what had happened. If Robert punished Derek by taking away chocolate, Shelley would sneak it to him in secret. Secretly, she would return the toys to him. No matter what happened, Derek always won. But the arguments eventually escalated to their breaking point. During Christmas of 2002, Derek woke up very early, jumped out of bed, and rushed downstairs to open the presents. But Robert stopped him. He told him that no one would be opening gifts until everyone had eaten breakfast. Derek immediately grew defiant. They all went to the kitchen, prepared breakfast, and served it. But Derek refused to eat. Robert stood firm. If he didn't eat, he wouldn't be allowed to leave the table. No food, no presents, but Derek was determined. He wanted the gifts but had no interest in eating. So he sat there silently, staring at his plate for the rest of the day. He didn't take a single bite, not even a sip of water. When the day ended, he went to bed without eating anything at all. The next morning, Robert left for work, and Shelley, behind his back, told Derek he could open the presents. She apologized for Robert's behavior, hugged him, comforted him. Overjoyed, Derek opened the gifts and discovered he'd received a game console. Some sources say it was a PlayStation 2, others claim it was an Xbox, but by then Derek was furious. He had wanted to open the gifts the day before, not now. So in a fit of revenge, he smashed the console to pieces. Shelley's response? She apologized and bought him a new one. As Derek grew older, living together became unbearable. Robert refused to bend, and neither did Derek. The arguments intensified, leading to a full-blown crisis in the household. Robert was overly authoritarian, Shelley was far too permissive. Derek, meanwhile, was spoiled and volatile. There were constant fights, endless tension. Eventually, Shelley gave in, but not by setting boundaries or enforcing discipline. Instead, she decided to take Derek to a therapist, not for actual therapy, but more like a quick checkup, a single session, a few comments. After just one afternoon, the therapist diagnosed Derek with depression, prescribed medication, and dismissed the case. But the medication he was given stripped away what little empathy Derek had left. His behavior worsened significantly, and not long after, Shelley and Robert broke up. Time passed, and we arrive at 2009. Derek was now 17, on the verge of graduating from high school. That's when he met the girl who would become his first girlfriend, Mey Mculock. Mey was 3 years younger than him. Born on July 17, 1994 in Hayward, Wisconsin, into a large family, 5 brothers and 3 sisters. People who knew Mey speak of her in the most glowing terms. She was sweet, sincere, full of light, pure innocence. And when she met Derek, she fell deeply in love. With his confidence, his decisiveness, his strong personality, they were the perfect couple. According to Shelley, Mey had a profoundly positive effect on her son. With her, Derek became more open, more sincere, more affectionate, a completely different person. But something quite striking happened in 2010. Mey became pregnant. Everyone feared the worst. Derek was rigid, controlling, and this news could have triggered an explosive reaction. But surprisingly, he took it well. In fact, he became even more attentive, more affectionate, and much more emotionally present with Mey. He even spoke to his mother, Shelley, and asked if Mey could move in with them. He wanted to take on the role of a father. He wanted to care for her, protect her. Shelley agreed. Mey moved in. The pregnancy progressed without complications, and eventually she gave birth to a baby boy named Gabriel, affectionately known as Gave. That's when everything changed. Again, Derek began reverting to his old self, or perhaps an even more extreme version. A baby brings chaos, disorder, unpredictability. But Derek wanted to control everything with obsessive precision. First, he tried to strictly regulate the baby's feeding and sleeping schedule. But a newborn cannot be managed that way. It cannot be programmed. Still, Derek insisted. And when Gabriel began eating solid food, he carried on with the same obsessive behavior. Second, he fixated on limiting the natural light in the house. This wasn't about saving electricity. It was because natural light bothered him. The curtains were always drawn. Neither Shelley nor Mey was allowed to open them, not even to check the weather or look outside. If anyone dared to peek through the window, Derek would explode with anger. Third, he began monitoring every move Shelley and Mey made, especially Mey. He tracked when they left, where they went, and when they returned. At that time, Mey was around 15 or 16 years old. She wasn't working, she was still in school, so Derek would scrutinize her schedule, what classes she had when she left, when she returned, who she was with. If she came home late, he accused her of cheating on him. The arguments became constant. At first, Mey submitted. He was her first boyfriend, older and more dominant. She was young, naive, and easily manipulated, but over time, she began to change. She started to stand up for herself, to argue back, to resist, and the more she pushed back, the worse Derek's reactions became. Then, in the midst of this escalating chaos, Shelley had to undergo surgery. She left the house temporarily to be hospitalized, and during that time Derek and Mey were left to care for her golden retriever. Lucy. Derek disliked the dog. He claimed she was too loud, too dirty, that she slobbered, shed too much hair, and made a mess. He constantly complained about the dog, and when Shelley was discharged from the hospital and returned home, she immediately noticed that Lucy was no longer there. She searched everywhere and asked Mey if she knew what had happened. Mey had no idea, but when she asked Derek, his response was chilling. "She's dead. She ran away and got hit by a car." He said it with complete detachment, without a hint of empathy, as if he were commenting on the weather. In that moment, Shelley knew. Something deep inside her told her the truth. She felt it instinctively. Derek had killed the dog. Lucy's death only escalated the tension in the house. Mey and Shelley began to push back more frequently. They questioned things. They started resisting his imposed curfews, and slowly they began to support each other. That's when Derek made a terrifying decision. He bought himself an Alaska .47 with that weapon in the house. His intention was clear. He wanted to silence them through fear. He wanted them to stop questioning him, to stop answering back, to be terrified into submission. But the opposite happened. The presence of the weapon only drew Shelley and Mey closer. It forced them to talk more seriously and to realize they had to stop this. Together, they identified 3 options: confront Derek directly, make him see reason, help him understand he had a problem. But they both knew that wouldn't work. He wouldn't listen. It would only make him more dangerous. Shelley could grab her grandson and run, flee and seek help. But they feared Derek would track them down and harm them. Mey could escape alone, find a safe place, go into hiding, and then try to rescue her son from a distance. Eventually, Mey chose the 3rd option. But tragically, things didn't go as planned. On September 8, 2012, now 18 years old, Mey packed a few belongings and fled the house when Derek discovered what had happened. He completely lost control. He tore through the house, flinging open the curtains, pacing the living room obsessively while repeating over and over that he had to take revenge, that he wouldn't allow his son to be raised by another man. He became fixated on the idea that Mey had run off with a lover, that she would marry someone else and give his son a new father. He kept repeating this, circling the room endlessly, unable to hear anyone, unable to stop. It was as if his mind had become stuck in a looping nightmare. Then he walked out the front door and disappeared for hours. Eventually, he returned home as if nothing had happened. But when he approached the house, he noticed something. Mey's car parked right outside. He thought she had come back, maybe to talk, maybe to reconcile, but when he entered the house, he found a trail of blood. As she contemplated what might have happened to Mey, Shelley feared the worst. She thought Derek had lost his mind, that he had struck a mirror and injured himself. There was so much blood. Too much. The trail led all the way to the downstairs bathroom. Following it, she called out to Derek. When she opened the door, she was confronted with a scene that left her utterly stunned. Mey had been brutally murdered. According to the autopsy, it was a complete slaughter. She was stabbed in the back, had defensive wounds across her chest, and what ultimately ended her life was a severe throat slashing. Her body was covered in stab wounds, bruises, and scratches. She had suffered immensely. The crime scene was so horrific that emergency responders immediately suspected Derek. They had no doubt it was him. A frantic search ensued, but Derek's son, little Gabriel, was nowhere to be found. Within hours, the case was publicized everywhere. Images of Derek and the young Gabriel flooded the media. An Amber Alert was issued. But astonishingly, no one, neither friends nor neighbors, had seen or heard anything. And of course, the worst fears began to take hold. Shelley was convinced Derek might kill Gabriel, her own 2-year-old grandson. In that moment, she was overwhelmed by guilt, convinced she had raised a monster, and that all of this was her fault. Then, a miracle occurred. At 5 a.m. on September 9, 2012, employees at a motel recognized Derek checking in. As I mentioned, his face was plastered everywhere. The staff immediately called the police. A team of officers arrived at the motel room, weapons drawn, ready to breach the door. But Derek calmly emerged with his hands raised, surrendering peacefully. Without violence or resistance, to everyone's relief, Gabriel was found safe and unharmed. The child hadn't realized what had transpired. Gabriel was taken into protective custody by social services, and Derek was brought to the police station. There, he confessed everything. But what followed was even more shocking. Derek requested a phone and called his beloved mother, Shelley. He apologized to her, speaking with an eerily calm, composed tone. He told her that he loved his son and begged her to take care of him. He spoke as if nothing had happened, as if his actions were inconsequential. His time in prison was brief, but the police found overwhelming evidence. Blood on his clothes, in his car, everywhere. The murder weapon was discovered in his vehicle. Everyone knew the sentence would be severe, given the brutality of the crime. An act fueled by intense personal rage. Derek was clearly dangerous, yet then Shelley stepped forward and chose to support him. She told the court that her son was a good person, a good boy who would never commit such an act. She claimed she loved him deeply and described him as a ray of sunshine. Later, she admitted that he was a monster, that she was in shock and couldn't believe what had happened. But then she retracted those words. Ultimately, Derek was sentenced. After reaching a plea agreement, he received 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole. The case might have ended there, but while incarcerated, Derek tried to hire a hitman to kill Mey's alleged lover, because, according to him, there was one. The attempt failed as the police intervened quickly. As for Gabriel, custody was granted to Shelley, who promised not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Now it's your turn. What do you think about this case? Does the outcome make sense to you? Well, that's it for today's video. What are your thoughts on this story? Honestly, I can't quite comprehend the mother's final reaction. I understand a mother's love, the desire to protect her child, to love him unconditionally, the greatest love in her life, but defending him even in the face of such a heinous crime, that baffles me. Look, I'm not here to judge. Well, actually, I am judging right now. I just can't wrap my head around half of this case, but as always, the final word is yours. What do you think? Do you believe Shelley bears as much responsibility as her son, or is she innocent? See you in the next video. Bye.